People often say heavyweight MMA is unpredictable. What they usually mean is that fights end suddenly, without warning, without a clear reason. One moment, everything looks stable, measured, under control. The next, it's finished. That explanation feels convenient because it turns consequence into randomness. But heavyweight MMA isn't chaotic, it's compressed. At this weight, the sport doesn't forgive mistakes. It doesn't slow them down. And it doesn't give the body time to recover when something goes wrong. What separates heavyweight from every other division isn't power alone. It's how quickly small errors become irreversible. Distance misjudged by inches, timing off by a fraction, balance broken for a second too long. In lighter divisions, those moments often fade. Fighters reset, systems recover, adjustments are made. At heavyweight, they don't fade. They accumulate. Once the margin disappears, experience stops protecting you. Toughness stops buying time. Planning stops working the way it did before. The body is no longer negotiating, it's reacting. What looks like chaos from the outside is usually consequence arriving faster than adaptation can keep up. That's why heavyweight fights feel sudden. Not because anything came out of nowhere, but because there was no room left for correction when it arrived. If you want calm explanations of MMA that focus on decisions and consequences under real pressure, subscribe to Cage Reality. This video isn't about power, it isn't about knockouts. And it isn't about shock moments pulled out of context. It's about why heavyweight M removes second chances and why, once recovery is gone, the fight has already changed, even if it hasn't ended yet. Number 1. Heavyweight MMA creates a powerful illusion of control. Compared to lighter divisions, everything looks slower. Fighters take fewer steps. Exchanges are shorter and more deliberate. There are long stretches where neither man commits fully, and nothing dramatic seems to happen. To most viewers, this reads as composure, as patience, as experienced fighters calmly managing risk. But what's actually happening is restraint. Heavyweights aren't comfortable. They're cautious. Every exchange carries enough force to permanently change the fight, so risk is managed from the opening seconds. Probing is limited. Experiments are rare. Small mistakes aren't tested, they're avoided. In lighter divisions, fighters often use early rounds to gather information. They misjudge distance, overextend slightly, recover, and adjust. At heavyweight, that process is dangerous. Information gathering comes at a cost the body may not be able to pay. This is why heavyweight fights feel tense even when nothing is happening. The calm isn't confidence, it's awareness. Both fighters understand how little margin exists and how quickly control can disappear if they guess wrong. The illusion forms because everything looks stable. But stability at heavyweight is fragile. The fight appears calm because no one wants to be the first to break it. And once it breaks, it rarely comes back. The problem is that calm doesn't mean forgiving. It just means the consequence hasn't arrived yet. Number 2, at heavyweight, recovery is the real currency, and it disappears quickly. Recovery isn't about toughness or heart. It's about how many times the body can absorb force, reset its internal systems, and continue making clear decisions under stress. It's the space between taking damage and being able to function again. As mass increases, force increases. As force increases, tolerance drops. The nervous system absorbs deeper shocks. Structural damage accumulates faster. Muscles fatigue unevenly. Balance becomes harder to restore. Timing slips. Clarity narrows. These changes aren't dramatic in isolation. They don't announce themselves. They show up quietly as slower reactions, heavier movements, and hesitation where confidence used to be. In lighter divisions, mistakes often fade. A bad exchange can be corrected. A round can be lost without the fight being lost. Fighters adapt mid-fight because their systems can still reset under pressure. Heavyweight removes that progression. Once the body absorbs a significant impact, everything that follows happens on a compromised system. The fighter may still be standing. They may still be dangerous, but the body is no longer operating with its full margin. Recovery doesn't fail all at once. It doesn't collapse dramatically. It simply stops keeping up. And once recovery falls behind the pace of consequence, mistakes stop being survivable. Number 3, this is where real heavyweight careers begin to make sense. From the outside, it often looks like fighters suddenly decline. One year they're competitive, durable, dangerous. The next they look slower, easier to hurt, unable to recover once exchanges turn chaotic. What usually changes isn't skill. Junior Dos Santos didn't forget how to strike, read distance, or manage opponents. What changed over time was his ability to absorb impact and reset his system afterward. After years of heavyweight exchanges, recovery windows didn't shrink slowly. They disappeared. Shots that once could be taken and corrected became decisive, not because he stopped making good decisions, but because the body supporting those decisions no longer recovered between moments. The timing was still there. The instincts were still there. The margin was gone. Alistair Overeem followed a different path, but reached the same constraint. He adapted more than almost anyone at heavyweight. He reduced risk, managed distance carefully, leaned into discipline, and avoided unnecessary exchanges. That adaptation extended his career, but it didn't change the underlying trade-off. At heavyweight, adaptation delays consequence. It doesn't remove it. Once recovery capacity fell below a certain threshold, even controlled fighting couldn't prevent collapse. The system could no longer absorb error. One misjudgment was enough to end the fight. These aren't stories of fighters losing ability. They're examples of recovery leaving the equation entirely. Number 4. This is why heavyweight MMA rarely produces redemption arcs. Fans expect veterans to adjust, reinvent themselves, and return smarter. That expectation comes from lighter divisions, where bodies can tolerate extended learning under pressure. Fighters lose, adapt, and come back with refinements that work because their systems still support experimentation. Heavyweight doesn't allow that luxury. Once tolerance drops, adjustment becomes dangerous. Trying new approaches means exposing the body to stress it may no longer absorb. The room to experiment disappears. Cain Velasquez is a clear example. His style relied on pressure, pace, and structural resilience, traits that are devastating at heavyweight when the body cooperates. But once injuries accumulated, the structure supporting that style stopped holding. Conditioning didn't fail. Motivation didn't disappear. Durability did. And when durability failed, the style had nowhere to go. There was no alternate version of that approach that worked without the same physical demands. Even fighters with elite defense face the same limit. Stipe Miocic's awareness, positioning, and composure allowed him to survive exchanges most heavyweights couldn't. But elite defense doesn't restore lost tolerance. It can delay consequence, but it can't reverse accumulated damage. Once cumulative stress sets in, preparation eventually meets physics. And physics doesn't negotiate. At heavyweight, decline feels abrupt because tolerance collapses suddenly. There's rarely a slow fade. One moment the system holds, the next it doesn't. Number 5. Psychological pressure tightens the trap at heavyweight. Heavyweights understand the stakes better than anyone. They know that exchanges don't need to accumulate to be decisive. One clean moment can end everything. That awareness doesn't usually create panic. It creates hesitation. Fighters become selective. Output drops. Probing becomes cautious instead of curious. Rather than testing control, they protect what little margin they believe they still have. From the outside, this looks like discipline. Inside the fight, it's a narrowing of options. When output decreases, rhythm disappears. When rhythm disappears, timing becomes harder to recover. Fewer attempts mean fewer chances to reassert control once it slips. Every choice becomes heavier because each mistake carries disproportionate cost. Protection feels like safety, but it quietly removes flexibility. Once control begins to fade, the fighter is faced with a dilemma: commit and risk immediate collapse, or hesitate and allow pressure to build. Neither option restores margin. Both accelerate the same outcome from different directions. This isn't fear, it's risk management under extreme consequence. And at heavyweight, risk management often shortens the path to collapse rather than extending it. Number 6. This is why fans so often misread heavyweight fights. When a fighter suddenly falls, the explanations turn personal. People talk about chins being gone, motivation fading, age catching up, or hunger disappearing. Those narratives feel satisfying because they reduce complexity to character flaws. But they miss the mechanism. What usually fails isn't courage or desire, it's system resilience. Once recovery stops functioning, the same strike carries a completely different consequence. The punch didn't become stronger. The opponent didn't suddenly improve. The body receiving it simply lost the ability to absorb and reset. Heavyweight damage doesn't announce itself gradually. It accumulates quietly and reveals itself abruptly. Tolerance doesn't erode in a smooth line. It collapses. That's why moments that once looked survivable suddenly aren't. Balance doesn't return. Clarity doesn't reappear. The body can no longer negotiate its way out of trouble. What looks like unpredictability is actually exposure. The mistake didn't cause the end. It revealed that recovery was already gone. Heavyweight MMA concentrates trade-offs more than any other division. You gain power. You gain authority. You gain the ability to end fights instantly, sometimes without warning or buildup. That is the advantage everyone sees. What's less visible is what you give up in return. You give up forgiveness. Forgiveness for timing errors that would be survivable elsewhere. Forgiveness for positional mistakes that could normally be corrected. Forgiveness for slow adaptation when the fight doesn't unfold as planned. At heavyweight, learning inside the fight is expensive. Every attempt to adjust carries immediate cost. The body absorbs those costs faster than it can process them. Once forgiveness disappears, experience stops protecting you. Past success doesn't buy margin. Familiar patterns don't guarantee safety. Strategy loses its depth and collapses into reaction because there's no room left to experiment. This is why second chances vanish so quickly at heavyweight. Not because the sport is cruel, not because fighters lack discipline or desire, but because the body can no longer absorb the cost of learning under stress. Heavyweight MMA doesn't reward survival, it rewards control and punishes the moment control slips. That's the reality of the division. If you value explanations that focus on consequences instead of hype, subscribe to Cage Reality. This channel exists to explain what fighting demands when recovery is no longer an option.